Here we are. We're beginning a whole new book of the Torah, the fourth book of the Torah, Ba-Midbar. It begins that God spoke to Moses, Ba-Midbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai, Oel Moed, in the tent of meeting, Echad LaChodesh Hasheni, on Rosh Chodesh of the second month of the year. Nisan is the first month. ER is the second month. We just finished ER, and now we are starting the third month, which is Sivan. Bashana Hashenit, in the second year of their getting out of Egypt. So what we have is we got out of Egypt in the middle of Nisan, the middle of the first month, and we took 50 days till we got the Torah. So we got the Torah in the first week of the third month. And this is all the first year getting out of Egypt, right? And then almost a year later, we're now about 11 months out. So we're at Rosh Chodesh of the second month, 11 and a half months out from leaving Egypt, right? And God speaks to Moses and basically says, okay, it's time to get packing. I took this Torah reading this year very seriously because it's all about packing and getting ready to move, and getting prepared, of course, for all of the issues that will confront the Jewish people. So there's a census that is taken of all the military age men because entering into the land of Israel is imminent. Theoretically, we should have been able to get into the land of Israel within a couple of, we left, when we finally leave, which is next week, right? When we finally leave, it's not next week, it's the Bahalot, right? So, there it is. After that, and after that, and then after that. So here it is. When does it tell you the date here? Right. So in Bahalotcha, it says the second year, the second month, on the 20th of the month. Okay, so we are at the first of the month, and people are going to leave in 20 days. In almost 3 weeks, they're going to start getting moving. So we stayed at Mount Sinai almost a year, and now we have to get ready to go. And then we're in ER. When we get to enter the land of Israel, it's only a couple of months later. In Av, we wait for the spies to come back to give us their report. We're on the brink of getting into the land, and then of course we don't. So, but we should have gotten into the land in the summer, and that's now the late spring, the beginning of summer. And in the middle of the summer, we were preparing to already be in the land of Israel. So we have all of this organizational stuff that takes place in the Torah reading, where we're all given our assigned place, where we have to camp, how we have to travel. The Levites are given their marching orders, literally, what they have to carry from the Mishkan. And they're warned, that they're also, given the special standing to do that. And instead of, they replace the firstborn, the Bechorim, and then they're warned about not mishandling any of the implements of the Mishkan. And that's basically the end of the Torah. So it's a very much of a preparatory Torah reading, getting everybody together, lining everybody up. I've compared it many times before, like when you're getting ready, like on a school trip, you have to get the whole class or you have to get the whole school ready. and everybody's got to know exactly who's going to be, boarding the bus first, and who's going to sit over here, and what, so it's all of that kind of logistical stuff. That's what our Torah reading is basically concerned. Now we go to the Haftarah, which is what our focus is. So the Haftarah is found on page 787 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, and it comes from the second chapter of Hosea, 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 right? Hosea, and it's the first verses of that chapter. So it's near the beginning of the book. Hosea lives in the 700s BCE. He's pretty much the earliest prophet. Him, Amos, they're pretty much the earliest ones. They're functioning in the early part of the 8th century. So we're talking 770 BCE, 760 BCE, and so on. He had a nice long career, and he is so he's living at a time when there are two kingdoms, right? There's the northern kingdom with the 10 tribes that split away from Judah, and the southern kingdom set up their own shrines. They don't go to Jerusalem to celebrate the holidays. There's a lot of dynamics going on between the north and the south. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they make military alliances against a common enemy, sometimes they fight against each other. And this is the couple of generations before 722 BCE, when the Assyrians take over the northern kingdom, destroy it, and exile the 10 tribes. And we never know what happened to them after that. So he's functioning right before that. And he's warning a lot of times, saying that, watch out, this is bad stuff. And we're going to see in this particular Haftarah that it goes back and forth, that there's a lot of admonition, a lot of scolding, but there's also a big, big prophecy of hope. And we should understand also that Hosea is the first prophet who uses the imagery of marriage to talk about the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So the image is that God is the husband and the Jewish people are the wife. So there's a patriarchal, privileging, there for sure. And Hosea is told by God that he has to live a life that will be a metaphor for the relationship between God and Israel. So he is told to purposely marry a promiscuous woman, possibly a prostitute, and that he should put up with all of her promiscuousness and with all of her messing around with other people, because he is living out the image of what God is suffering from the people of Israel. That's an image that starts in the first chapter, and it's going to become important in this chapter. Yeah, Jen.
That sounds like not a really great basis for a marriage. I want you to be my metaphor. Is this the prophet who also names his children bizarre things so that they can also represent? Great dad there. A+.
So there, yeah. So the prophet is put in this pretty lousy position. You're right. Every prophet is in a lousy position, right? This is a specifically graphic, way of putting the prophet into a bad position. Every prophet is charged to speak truth to the people who don't want to hear it, right? So that's always a miserable job. That prophet, it's not a cushy job, right? You're telling off kings, you're telling off priests, you're telling off the population, you're not a popular person. Prophets do not win popularity contests. That's number one. And here, you're right. Here, in this particular case, Hosea has to act out certain things. There are certain examples. Jeremiah does. Jeremiah does a bunch of performance art kind of things. And here is Hosea doing this kind of thing. Now, did he really do it, or is this simply his speech, his story? In the end, it doesn't really matter that much because he's still put on the spot, and his own private life is co-opted for this purpose. You're right. He has no choice here. He has no real way of charting his own course, and that's part of what a Navi means. A Navi, again and again, is a person who serves God even though they don't want to. We had Moses, right? Moses fights God tooth and nail. When God says, I want you to be my messenger, I want you to be my representative, I want you to take the children out of Israel. And Moses says, well, taking the children out of Israel, I'm all for it. I'll write you a check, but don't make me the person who has to do it. I've said it before, it's the longest conversation between a human being and God in the Torah, is Moses fighting against God, wanting Moses to be the leader. And of course, in the end, he breaks down and he does it, but it's not fun. It's not, this is going to be so enriching for your life. You're going to learn so much. You're going to, look back on your life and be grateful that you had such a wonderful. It's a life of sacrifice, and here Hosea is sacrificing a very specifically, distressing way. Yeah.
And his wife and his kids probably don't have a great time with this either.
Right, and again, they're going to be appealed to in this haftarah. We'll see how things a little bit play out. Again, within the patriarchal realities, women didn't have that many choices to begin with. To be married was better than not to be married in those days. At least that was the general wisdom that people believed in. And what Geraldine said before, you should just be safe and taken care of and so on. Well, for a woman, that means you should just be married, right? Otherwise, you're not going to be safe. Otherwise, you're not going to be taken care of. So, that Gomer, Hoshea's wife, marries, agrees to be taken to wife by Hosea is not a surprise. The fact that Hosea chooses her, again, it's against his will. It's because God tells him that he has to do it. Okay, so now we're going to pick up the story from the second chapter. And again, let's be on the lookout. Why was this reading, whatever other merits or interest it might have, why is this reading chosen for to accompany our Torah reading? So who's going to read for us today?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Natalie. So 787 in the Eitz Chaim, Hosea chapter 2 from the top.
The number of the people of Israel shall be like that of the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And instead of being told, you are not my people, they shall be called children of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel shall assemble together and appoint one head over them, and they shall rise from the ground, for marvelous shall be the day of Jezreel. Oh, call your brothers my people, and your sisters lovingly accepted.
Okay, so let's stop here. We have a little bit of a hint in the way that the words are set with breaks here. So this is the opening of this vision, of this prophecy. So this is positive. This is actually good. It recognizes that there was a bad background, but this is redemption. This is putting everything back together again. So instead of being told, you are not my people, right? In the Hebrew, it's lo ami atem. right? You are named Lo Ami. And that is actually one of the names of one of Hoshea's children, because he has to name the kids in a way that's also symbolic. So God is saying that you're going to have a name change, and you're not going to be called, you're not my people anymore. Instead, you're going to be called B'nai El Chai, the children of the living God. Okay, so that's a whole transformation, and it's basically a redemption, right? It's a re-embracing of the children who have been rejected. They're not going to be rejected in the end, right? They're going to be re-accepted. And when that happens, so what does verse 2 tell us? What does verse 2 tell us is going to happen?
The people of Israel are going to rise.
Right? They're going to rise from the ground. If they've been knocked down to the ground, they're going to rise from the ground. Or another way of looking at it is they're going to arise from all the corners of the earth, wherever they are. The land is going to just see all of a sudden people reawakening and on the march and excited again, right? So we have that idea. But what does it say right before that? Who's going to do this?
They're going to have one head.
They're going to have one leader.
It's
Why
a
is that important?
reunification of Israel and the
Because
two kingdoms.
these are technical political terms. The people of Judah and the people of Israel. Those are two different countries. Those are two different kingdoms. The people of Israel is the northern kingdom. The people of Judah is the southern kingdom. Right? It's like North Dakota and South Dakota, two different states. So this, but worse, because they're really divided from each other. So this is a prophecy of reunification in a true sense. And the one head, the one ruler, that's the symbol of, okay, the union is reestablished. Everything, we'll make friends with each other. We'll recognize that we're really brothers and sisters with each other. We really are one people. We shouldn't be, so divided from each other. It's all going to be good, right? So there's both an acceptance by God of the Jewish people, reuniting between the Jewish people and God, and a reuniting among ourselves. And implicit in this is that you can't have one without the other. You can't have God just being wonderfully involved with the Jewish people. If the Jewish people can't get along with each other, what is one of the famous teachings that the rabbis offered? Why did the second temple get destroyed? Like the rabbi said, if we have all the prophets, if you look at the way the prophets harangued the Jewish people, they lived in the time of the first temple. So they argue, and we're going to see even in this Haftorah, they argue with the Jewish people, what's wrong with you? Why are you worshiping idols? Why are you doing all these terrible things? So the rabbis asked, but you know what? Idolatry really was passé, in Second Temple times. It really wasn't that big of a problem for the Jewish people. At least that's what they claim. So they say, so why did we get destroyed again? And what was their answer? Because we hated each other for no reason. Right? Because we forget about outside people, forget about outside influences. We couldn't get our act together. We couldn't abide with each other. So this is a vision already 1,000 years before the rabbis that these things have to go together. Okay. Question, do we see any connections with our Torah reading yet? Sarita says she's nodding her head, but Lynn raised her hand, so she gets to speak first.
Sorry, Sarita. No, I just noticed when I read it earlier, and again now, the whole beginning of the Torah is count, 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 count. And here it's like, your people are the grains of sand. There are too numerous to be counted.
Right, beautiful. Right, so it's both a common theme. Our Torah reading begins with the idea that we have to get ready for this transformation. We're going to go into the promised land. We're going to actually finish our process of redemption. We got out of Egypt. Now we're finally going to get into the promised land. but we need to count them, each tribe, each family, and so on. And now, what Hosea is saying is that when we get to this redemption, say your words again. What did you say, Lynn? What is Hosea's contrasting vision?
Well, yeah, that the people should be more than the grains of sand and unable to be counted.
It'll be beyond counting, right? It'll be better than that, right? We will be, now that image, right, that you're saying,
That what-
more than the grains of sand, what is that image coming from?
Doesn't that God tell Abraham that?
Right, so you're thinking about that original kind of vision. We will be so numerous, asher lo yisafer merov, that cannot be counted because of how numerous they are. So here we have an echo, of that as well. And as a result, it's a kind of it's not just good, it's the best. It's the ultimate best, right? Counting and have limit, that's a limit, right? To be able to count what you've got is to acknowledge that there's a limit to it. To be able to say, no, this is going to be beyond any counting. So this is going to be super wonderful. Okay, and now what do we say? The last verse that we just read, verse 3, instead of lo ami, instead of you are not my people, look at back in verse 1, right? Instead of being told you are not my people, they should be called children of the living God. But now we say, oh, call your brothers, you among yourselves. Call each other. Imru la'achechem. Say to your brothers, Ami, Ami, my people, my people. Right? So this is a celebration of, wow, we made it. Right? You're mine, I'm yours as a people. We're connected. And here we have a little bit of an egalitarianism. And to your sisters, Velachotechem ruchama. Ruchama, from the word lerachem, to have compassion, to have love. So ruchama, the one who has been beloved, who has been accepted with love. Right? So lovingly accepted. Okay, so, and this in Israel today, this is a name for girls, ruchama, right? And Ami is a name for boys, right? Yeah. Now back to you, Sarita. Yes, what do you want to say?
So I'm just struck that, in the Torah portion, each tribe is separately being counted and each tribe has its head, but they're still united. In spite of that, they're really united in one common purpose, and they see themselves as one group. And here, in order to come back together, they actually have to appoint one head over everybody. Yeah.
They have to reconstitute.
Yeah.
Right. This is putting the broken egg back together again. Right. In the Torah reading, we're still in an original state. And now, when we've split ourselves apart, we're going to have to actually work harder to be able to glue the pieces, the broken pieces, back together. Yeah. Okay. Now, the children are addressed. Verse 4. Natalie, back to you.
Rebuke your mother, rebuke her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. And let her put away her harlotry from her face, and her adultery from between her breasts. Else will I strip her naked, and leave her as on the day she was born. And I will make her like a wilderness, render her like desert land, and let her die of thirst. I will also disown her children, for they are now a harlot brood, in that their mother has played the harlot. She that conceived them has acted shamelessly, because she thought, I will go after my lovers, who supply my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink.
Okay, so this comes back to that, what I explained before was set up already from the previous chapter. And now this is the irate husband God saying, children, right, people of Israel and Judah, right, my loyal children, my people, rebuke your mother. Well, who's your mother? Your mother is you. right? So this is self-criticism, or this is, within the community, who are the loyalists and who are not the loyalists, who wants to follow God and who not. But the bulk of the Jewish people has already been established to be unfaithful and running away from God. And now this is a rhetorical, what can I say, conceit on the part of the prophet, calling out to the people and sort of like splitting them up into two, right? The good guys and the bad guys, right? So there's a very graphic image here. And here we have the rejection part, right? Lo ishti, va'anochi lo isha. She is not my wife. She is not my woman. Right? This is like Porgy and Bess, the opposite. And I am not her man, right? Because why? Because she has been so, unfaithful, right? And she shows it off. She loves the high life that she enjoys from all of her sugar daddies, right? This is an image, that she has jewelry. Oh, look, this was given to me by my the person that I had an affair with 2 years ago. Isn't it beautiful? She has all these doodads that she can show off of, and she's understood as saying, I will go after my lovers who supply my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. Do I get anything from God? No. But these other gods, they really benefit me. So this is her own misguided thinking that she really is just doing, what makes sense. Why shouldn't I do this? They're good to me, right? They put me up in a beautiful fancy apartment. They take me out to dinner in fancy restaurants. I like this. I like being appreciated. Okay. Any comments? Yeah, Sarita.
So looking at the first section here in this section now, when the people come together and reunite, it's like calling on them to rebuke, to reject sort of their former self.
Right. And we had this last week also.
Yeah.
We had this concept of people, the children, that was what they remember. All they remember is going on these idolatrous festivals, these picnics, in the wonderful countryside to do this. They remember this stuff. So now this is a self-correction that is being called for. And, how do we read the connection between the introduction and this part? It doesn't have to be chronological. In other words, it doesn't have to be after you've been reunited, then do this. But I predict that you will be reunited. You want to get reunited? In order to get reunited, you're going to have to do this, right? So, okay. Let's keep going a little bit, and then we'll have even more material to work with. So, verse 8.
Assuredly, I will hedge up her roads with thorns and raise walls against her, and she shall not find her paths. Pursue her lovers as she will, she shall not overtake them, and seek them as she may, she shall never find them. Then she will say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then I fared better than now, and she did not consider this. It was I who bestowed on her the new grain and wine and oil, I who lavished silver on her and gold, which they used for Baal. Assuredly, I will take back my new grain in its time and my new wine in its season, and I will snatch away my wool and my linen that serve to cover her nakedness.
Okay, let's stop here. That is more, you're right. But let's stop here anyway, because it's already a mouthful. So what's the picture that we get here? What does God say God has done and tried to do? Two basic projects. God has engaged in two basic missions. The second mission, right, that we just, the second half of this long statement is where did all the good stuff come from? All the wine and the oil and everything. Where did it really come from? She thinks it came from all of her lovers. She thinks that that's where she got all the good life. But where did she really get it from?
From God.
I've been the one who's been secretly paying the rent, and I've been the one who's been actually keeping her in having the life that she's enjoying. And she thinks that it's these other guys who are doing it. I'm doing it. I'm supporting her, but she's rejecting me. She doesn't understand that I am the one who has been good to her all this time. That's the first, that's the second of the images. The first part, what's the first part? What's the first thing that God has also tried to do? However, we actually know, and we'll see it a little later, that he's failed. He tried to put obstacles in her path. He tried to mess up her plans of getting together with her lovers. He tried to make it harder for her. He tried to somehow throw a monkey wrench into that whole journey so that she would give up. And she would say, you know what, it's not worth it. God, let me just go back already to my first lover, because this is not really worth my trouble. So I tried to do that, but then what's the implication is, of course, that no matter what, no matter how many different obstacles and roadblocks God has put in her way, Israel has somehow found the way to get around them in order to be able to betray God. That's the rhetorical force that's here. That, like, it's not just casual. It's not a mistake. It's not just, oh, well, I fall into temptation. There's like this concerted, gritting your teeth effort to get away from serving God, despite the fact that God is doing all of this stuff to try to get you back and to simply, while you're not back, keep you alive and survive. Right? So this is God's complaint and complaint and complaint. Okay. So this is a very, it's a very artful way of basically, yelling at the people of Israel and going, what the heck is wrong with you? Why can't you see this? Okay, go ahead. Well,
now will I uncover her shame in the very sight of her lovers, and none shall save her from me. And I will end all her rejoicing, her festivals, new moons and Sabbaths, all her festive seasons. I will lay waste her vines and her fig trees, which she thinks are a fee she received from her lovers. I will turn them into brushwood, and beasts of the field shall devour them. Thus will I punish her for the days of the Baalim, on which she brought them offerings. When decked with earrings and jewels, she would go after her lovers, forgetting me, declares the Lord.
Okay, so that's the conclusion of this part of the statement. So what is God saying that God's reaction is going to be? Right? I've had it. Right? So what is God going to do?
He's going to be a very, very bad ex. Like, you don't want.
And he's going to be violent. It's not going to be nice. He's going to be vindictive, right? He's going to punish. So he's going to make her life miserable. Okay? There's an interesting set of terms. For instance, I will end all her rejoicing, her festivals, new moons, and Sabbaths, all her festive seasons. Well, aren't those actually, if she keeps all these festive seasons, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that like a very nice, Jewish set of practices? Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, festivals.
Yes. So why is he?
So why is God? What's he so bent out of shape? What's the problem?
I suppose it's abolish. I don't know what the
That's
actual
that's what he
is.
sort of says at the end, right? He says, thus will I punish her for the days of the Baalim, the Baals. Right? In other words, they took the stuff and they turned it into Baal worship. Right? It's a great idea to have a festival. But instead of having a festival to celebrate getting the Torah, we'll have a festival to celebrate that Baal makes the ground grow. Right? It's great to have a stop everything and let's just dance for God and make, let's have a day of rest, but let's dance for the other God. So they've transposed the kinds of things that they inherited as a rhythm of life, and they change the reason for it, the rationale for it, to be something that's idol worship. And God says, I'm gonna stop that. God says, I will turn them into brushwood, and the beasts of the field shall devour them. That's the end of verse 14. So the devouring, what's being devoured?
The vines and the fig trees.
Right. They're being devoured. Devour is a very strong word, right? Devour is a really aggressive kind of eating. I was so hungry, I just devoured that kiddish, right? Something like that, right? So devour is like really working hard.
Hey.
The word in the Hebrew is not so extraordinary. The word in the Hebrew is va'achalatam, and they will eat it, right? They will eat it. This phrase, right? Va'achalatam chayat hasadeh. They will be eaten by the wild beasts. That actually echoes what we read in the last couple of weeks as the image of Shemitah and Yovel. In that image, it's actually beautiful. It talks about the harmony of nature and human beings. Everybody's partaking from the earth's bounty. The poor people can find what they need to eat. The rich people take only what they need instead of hoarding it. And the animals, the wild animals, everybody's just roaming around like the Garden of Eden, eating whatever they want from the field and from the vineyard. So this verse, in a different context, is actually wonderful. But here, it's a punishment, right? Here it's saying that this is not going to be because of Shemitah, because you've voluntarily taken away your own selfish impulses. This is going to be, you want to be selfish and you want to only have the best for yourself and for nobody else. And I'm going to take it away from you by force and give it to the wild beasts. And this, of course, is what we said last week, when God says, if you don't follow this, I will exile you, and then the land will get its rest. If you don't want to let the land get its rest, I'll get you out of the picture, and then the land will be able to breathe a sigh of relief. Right? So there's a little bit of an echo of that, but that's not our Torah reading. Our Torah reading is our question. After all, this Haftorah was not chosen for the Shemitah readings; it was chosen for this reading. So so now we've read a whole more, another page and a half or more from the Haftorah. Any other connections? Not so easy, right? Now it doesn't seem to be that obvious. Lynn, yeah.
Sorry, I'm remembering in the Torah portion something about paying for the firstborn sons and something about paying for, was it just the firstborn sons? I don't know. And so,
Yeah. Yes.
right. And so it's the same kind of thing here. I lost my thought.
How's it the same? How's it connected? Interesting. What's the connection?
But he's still, Take back. Right. Okay. So he's taking everything back. That was what I meant to say. Even if it's wrong, that's where my brain wanted to go. So he's asking for payment in the Torah portion, and now he's taking away everything that he thinks he's owed.
So that, I don't know if we can keep on thinking this through, maybe it'll get a little more focused
lost-
on what
yeah,
you're saying. But I think you're bringing up an interesting kind of connection. First of all, children, right? So when you're talking about the Pidyon HaBechor, the redemption of the firstborn that happens in our Torah reading, I'll give a little more information about that in a second. So we have here also focused on the children, right? And we have the children as being introduced as actually the first of the redeemed or repentant group, right? That you're going to be called B'nai El Chai. The children are going to be called a whole different name than what they used to be called, right? So what I'm thinking is, based on bringing this up, is what happened. The Levites take over. As I said, they take over this ritual status. Why did the Levites take over that status? It was originally given to the firstborn. The firstborn were originally supposed to be those people who were the functionaries taking care of all of the sacred stuff that had to be dealt with. But the Levites are taking their place because the Levites were the faithful ones. The Levites were the tribe that did not worship the golden calf. So the Levites end up getting a reward, and all the firstborn, which is an automatic kind of entitlement, is lost because the firstborn didn't stand up and stop the betrayal. And that's what we're talking about here. Israel is constantly betraying God. And then there's an exchange between who will be accepted and who won't be accepted. The Levites then have to be exchanged for the firstborn. And then the redemption price, the 5 shekels, was because they were it wasn't a one-to-one correspondence. There was something like 273 extra firstborn. So they had to, I'm trying to get it straight here. So yes, so they had to be redeemed. They have to be de-sanctified by paying the 5 shekels. And that's what got them off of being sacred. And then only the Levites, who were the loyal ones, get to be accepted by God. That's a little bit of a connection that I could see based on what you brought up. So you get full credit. Go ahead.
But it also talks about what the woman, the wife, is giving Baal instead of God. They're giving
Right.
all the offerings to.
Right. So that's for sure. Yes. That's within the context of how religious behavior was back then. Offerings to the God that you adored. So there, she's giving offerings to those other gods, to the Baal, instead of giving the offerings to God, for sure. Yes. So I want to point out one more little image. Take a look back at verse 5. Natalie, can you read that one more time?
Verse 5.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
787.
Assuredly, no, that's 8. Where is 5? 5. And her adultery?
Yeah, go ahead.
And her adultery from between her breasts.
That's the end of verse 4. Now, 5.
Else will I strip her naked and leave her as on the day she was born, and I will make her like a wilderness. Render her like desert land and let her die of thirst.
Okay, does that sound like maybe we have some kind of connection? What's the name of our Torah reading? Jen, I can't hear you.
In the midst of the desert, in the middle of the desert. Yeah.
In the wilderness.
In the wilderness.
Midbar. The word is midbar. Midbar is called desert or wilderness. And that's what we have here. God says, I'm going to turn her like into a desert. Right? So we have an image of desert. And now let's look at 16.
Where is 16?
Back to where we left off on 789.
Assuredly, I will speak coaxingly to her and lead her through the wilderness and speak to her tenderly.
Okay, so there's the wilderness again.
Yeah.
So we have a back and forth. It's like it's going back and forth between a very negative image of wilderness and an interaction with the wilderness with God's help and God's protection. So what God says at the beginning when God is angry is, I'm going to throw her out and she's just going to be completely denuded of all advantages, of all protections, like the howling wilderness, nothing. Without me, the wilderness will just be a place of disaster. Now God says, this is verse 16, I'm going to take her back. Eventually, we're going to reconcile. I'm furious with her. She doesn't get it. She doesn't respond to everything that I've tried to do. But you know what? Maybe I'll try a different tack. Maybe I'll be soft and gentle instead of hard and yelling and punishing. And then if she can feel me close to her as I take her through the hard times, through the blasted wilderness, then she'll feel my presence, right? And I will show how much I'm devoted to her. So that wilderness image brings us back to, hold on a second, brings us back to our Torah portion. That's the setting of our Torah portion. So we read all about these details about numbers and about what's happening with the people and so on and so forth. But one of the things that we sort of have to understand is the context. The context is that all of this organizational stuff and all of this kind of trying to figure out, where do I fit in? What number am I? What's my job? All of that is a response to a chaotic, threatening, vast wasteland that is all around the people. Without God setting up the camp the way we hear it, with the Mishkan in the middle and with everything being taken care of, without that kind of orientation, we would be lost in the wilderness. That's what God is saying here. Right? Without me, you're going to be lost. With me, the wilderness is going to be there, but I'm going to go with you. Okay, let's keep going. 17. No, nobody can hear you, Natalie. Unmute. No,
Okay.
okay.
All right.
Yeah.
My computer went off and I'm on my iPhone now.
All right.
Okay. I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a plowland of hope. There she shall respond as in the days of her youth, when she came up from the land of Egypt. And in that day, declares the Lord, you will call me Ishi, and no more will you call me Baali.
So Ishi, wait a second, because I don't know why they don't translate it. Ishi means my man, my husband.
I see.
Right? And no more will you call me my Baal. Now this is a play on words. Baal was the name of a god that was an idol that the pagan worship that the Jews were constantly accused of following. And Baal was the man, the owner, the master, the boss. That's what a Baal is, right? And he says, you're not going to call me that anymore. You won't even call me Baal, right? Instead, you're going to call me the way I say you're my woman and I'm your man. Right? So there's a little bit of a softening of that hierarchy of that patriarchal, emphasis on the man being the boss. Go ahead.
For I will remove the names of the Baalim from her mouth, and they shall never more be mentioned by name. In that day, I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the fields, the birds of the air, and the creeping things of the ground. I will also banish bow, sword, and war.
Bow and
sorry.
arrow.
Bow, sword, and war from the land. Thus I will let them lie down in safety. And I will espouse you forever. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice, and with goodness and mercy. And I will espouse you with faithfulness. Then you shall be devoted to the Lord.
Okay, so we should note there's a shift in address at the top of this, right? Who is God talking to in verse 18? Right? Direct address. Who is God talking to in verse 16?
Israel?
Third person.
Well, them, third person.
Them, right? Assuredly I will, or her. I will speak coaxingly to her. I will lead her. So he's talking to Israel, but he's talking about Israel, the image of the mother, of the wife, of the beloved, as well. That, that image of an Israel that's faithful, I will eventually get to that image. And then finally with 18, he's talking to that woman. He's talking to his beloved, right? Directly addressing her, right? And then he goes back in 20 to third person. In that day, I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field. This goes back to what I was mentioning before. This is the Shemitah and Yovel vision. This is the Garden of Eden vision. When everybody, the beasts of the field, the beasts, the wild beasts won't be threatening. We're all going to get together and we're all going to figure out how to ecologically, coexist. It's all going to be great. Right? So that's tied to reestablishing a close, loving relationship with God. No more war, right? You will live in security. This is all sabbatical year imagery, right? That God is saying, if you can come back to me, and if I can persuade you to come back to me, then everything will be perfect, right? It'll be just beautiful. And then we have the pledge at the end, back to direct address, right? In the future, everything will be beautiful. Now, I want to tell you what I plan to do with you. I will espouse you forever. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice and with goodness and mercy. And I will espouse you with faithfulness. And then you will know God. V'yadat et Hashem. You shall be devoted to the eternal. V'yadat, the way Adam knew Eve. Right? We will be together in a loving union. Those three, ve'irastich li leolam, ve'irastich li b'tzedek u'mishpat v'chesed u'rachamim, ve'irastich li emunah, v'yadat et Hashem. Those verses are used in the morning traditionally by people who put on tefillin. When you wrap the strap around the finger of your hand, you make 3 wedding rings with the strap of the tefillin, and you say, I will espouse you forever. Ve'irastich li leolam. Ve'irastich li b'tzedek u'v'mishpat u'v'chesed u'bracham. Ve'irastich li, so this, I will espouse, I will espouse, I will espouse. 3 espousals, 3 rings on your hand as a symbol of binding yourself in every meaning of the word to God, and a kind of a wedding ceremony that's happening with that idea of being loyal and connected to God. So this is, it starts out beautiful, but with a kind of a remembrance of the fact that we're not there yet. Then it goes into the big kvetch, right? And then it comes back to a promise that it can be beautiful, it can be wonderful. And in another place, we have one of the prophets saying, I remember when you followed me out into the wilderness, right? Like a young beloved. Right? No matter where I went, you went after me. You went into the howling wasteland. You didn't care because of your love for me. So this setting of now we're going to be walking with God through this nondescript place. Let's remember, we're coming up to Shavuot, that the wilderness is the counter picture to the mountain. Right? The mountain is a defined landscape feature. Right? It sticks out, literally. Right? There it is. When we got the Torah at this one place that has a top and has a bottom. Right? God is at the top. We're all circling around. At the bottom, we receive the Torah from God. And then we build the Mishkan while we're still there. But then, says God, okay, time to get moving. You have to go. And guess what you're going to go through? A wilderness. And a wilderness is about no markings of landscape, no identifiable north, south, east, west, whatever. Right? You're going to go into the undefined. You're going to go into the wide open space. If you stick with me, it'll be okay. This is what you're going to have to do. Right? You're going to have to hold on to my hand very tight when we start going out there. Right? Otherwise, you're going to get separated and get lost. Here we have, obviously a much more mature kind of image of separation, but a separation that can be repaired. I want to point out that this image is very much against the regular marriage law of the tradition. In marriage law, in traditional Torah marriage law, if the woman is unfaithful to her husband, she can never go back to her husband. She has to be thrown out of the house. If she's caught with witnesses, she gets put to death. If there's no witnesses, then she just gets exiled out of the house. So this image by Hosea is very radical. It's a completely, anti-halachic, to use an anachronism, anti-legal idea. This is transcending all of those broken rules and saying, God is saying, I don't care. I'm ready to start all over again. It's not possible for human beings to do this, but my love is infinite. My love washes over all of those kinds of limitations. All right, I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and also a wonderful Shavuot. Everybody's invited, of course, to study as much Torah as you can. Ner Tamid is going to be our home base for this year's Tikkun. Everything has been shared with you as much as possible. Geraldine, you wanted to say something?
Is that why it sort of leads into the connection of reading the book of Ruth on Shmuel?
That's part of it. The fact that we have a chuppah, that we put up a chuppah, right? All of these kinds of senses of insisting on the connection, right? Insisting on the connection. Yeah, good. All right, Sei gesund, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Like I said.